My name is James. I'm 28 years old. For the last 12 years of my life, I've done everything for one person. I sacrificed my dreams, my money, my time, all for her. She was my mother. And this is the story of how she destroyed me. This is the story of betrayal that changed my life forever. But before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand who she was. Or at least, who I thought she was. Asterisk, my mother's name was Sarah. She was beautiful, intelligent, and for most of my childhood, she was everything to me. My father left us when I was just 4 years old, so it was always just me and Mom. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep us afloat. I remember being 7 years old, watching her come home exhausted, her feet hurting, her back aching. But she would still sit with me and help me with my homework. She would make me smile even when she was falling apart inside. I promised myself that day that I would spend the rest of my life making her proud, making her life easier, showing her that all her sacrifices meant something. That little boy's promise defined everything I became. Asterisk, by the time I was 16, I had my first job. I saved every penny. By 18, I was working full-time and going to community college. By 22, I had my business degree and a decent job in finance. And my mother, she finally got to rest. She quit her jobs and stayed home because I could take care of her now. I moved us to a nice apartment in the suburbs. I bought her a car. I put money in her account every month. Every single month. And she was happy, or at least I thought she was. Looking back now, I realize I was so blind. I thought if I gave her everything, if I sacrificed enough, she would love me forever. What a fool I was. Asterisk, then came David. David Mitchell was 56 years old when he met my mother at the grocery store. He was rich. Really rich. He owned real estate, had investments, drove a Mercedes, and apparently that's all it took. I remember when Mom first told me about him. She was nervous, like she was asking for permission. She said, "James, I met someone. His name is David. I think I really like him." I was happy for her. I really was. I thought, good. Mom deserves to be happy. Mom deserves love. I was such a fool. Such a complete and utter fool. Asterisk, David came into our lives like a hurricane. Within 2 weeks, he was coming over for dinner. Within a month, he was staying over. By the 3rd month, he was basically living with us. And my mother, she changed. Completely changed. She stopped calling me. When I called her, she was always busy. "Oh, James, David and I are about to go to a restaurant." "James, David wants to take me to the Bahamas." "James, David is taking me shopping." "I'll call you later." Later never came. Do you understand that? Later never came. The woman who had always been there for me, who had given me everything, suddenly had no time for her own son. Asterisk, I told myself it was okay. She deserved to have a boyfriend. She deserved to travel and enjoy life. I wasn't going to be selfish about it, so I stepped back. I gave her space. I was understanding about it. What a mistake that was. What a catastrophic, life-altering mistake. Asterisk, 6 months into dating David, my mother sat me down. She had something important to tell me. We were in our apartment, the apartment I paid for, and she looked nervous, guilty even. She said, "James, David has asked me to marry him," and I said yes. I was shocked, but I tried to be supportive. "That's great, Mom. Congratulations. I'm happy for you." But then she said something that made my blood go cold. She said, "James, David wants us to move in with him. He has a huge house in Connecticut, and he thinks it would be better if it was just the 2 of us for a while. He wants to spend time with me without distractions." That's what she called me, her own son. The person who had given up everything for her. I was a distraction, asterisk. She was asking me to move out. My own mother was asking me to leave the apartment I had paid for and the life I had built, so she could be alone with a man she had known for 6 months. I felt like I had been punched in the chest, like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet, but I didn't show it. I couldn't, so I said, "Of course, Mom. If that's what makes you happy, then I'm happy for you." And I started looking for a new apartment. I helped her pack. I drove her to David's house in Connecticut. I helped her move in, and then she disappeared from my life. Asterisk. After my mother moved in with David, I barely heard from her. I would call, and she wouldn't answer. I would text, and she would reply hours later with one-word answers. Busy. Later. Can't talk now. 2 weeks after she moved to Connecticut, I got really sick. Like hospital-level sick. I had appendicitis and needed surgery. I was terrified. I was alone, facing major surgery, and I needed my mother. So I called her. I said, "Mom, I'm in the hospital. I'm having surgery tomorrow. Can you come?" Do you know what she said? Do you know what the woman who had sacrificed everything for me said when I was facing surgery? She said, "Oh, James, David and I are in the middle of our honeymoon in Cabo. Can't you ask a friend to help you? I'm sure you'll be fine." I was alone in a hospital bed, about to have major surgery, and my mother was in Cabo with a man she had known for less than a year. I cried. I actually cried like a child, alone in that hospital room, with no one to hold my hand. Asterisk after my surgery, I recovered alone. My friends helped where they could, but they had their own lives. I spent 2 weeks in my apartment, weak and in pain, and not once did my mother call to check on me. Not once. Not a single phone call. Not a text message, nothing. Radio silence from the woman who gave birth to me. Eventually, I healed, and I tried to reach out again. I invited her to lunch. She said she would think about it. 3 weeks later, she still hadn't answered, and that's when I finally realized my mother didn't love me anymore. Or maybe she never did. Maybe I was always just someone to take care of her, to provide for her, to worship her. And now that she had found someone richer, someone more interesting, I was disposable. Asterisk then. About 8 months after she moved in with David, something happened that changed everything. My mother called me. Not a text, an actual phone call. And she sounded desperate. She said, "James, I need to talk to you. Can you come to David's house this weekend? It's important." I went. I don't know why. Some part of me still hoped that maybe she realized what she had done. Maybe she wanted to apologize. Maybe she wanted me back in her life. I was about to learn the real reason she called. And trust me, it was so much worse than anything I had imagined. Asterisk when I got to David's house in Connecticut. My mother was waiting for me at the door. She looked guilty, ashamed even. And David was standing behind her with this smug look on his face, like he knew something I didn't. We sat down in their living room, this massive, cold room with white furniture and expensive art on the walls, and my mother started crying. She said, "James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I said, "What is it, Mom?" And she said, "Do you still have your inheritance from Grandma?" My grandmother had passed away 3 years before. She had left me $180,000 in her will. I had put most of it in savings and investments. I was saving it for my future, for a house, for security, for stability. And my mother knew about it. Because I had told her, I had shared my life with her. I had trusted her with everything. And now she was using that trust against me. Asterisk, my mother said, "James, David's business is having some problems. He made some bad investments, and he needs help. He needs $150,000. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My hands actually started shaking. I said, "Mom, are you asking me to give your husband my inheritance? The money my grandmother left me? The money I've been saving and protecting?" And she said, "James, he's my husband. I love him. And if I lose him, I have nothing. You have a good job? You can rebuild. But I'm 54 years old. I can't start over. Please, James, please help us. Please help your mother." That's when David spoke. He had this cold, predatory tone. He said, "Look, kid, your mother and I are trying to build a future together. If you really love her like you say you do, you'd help her. But if you're too selfish to do that, then maybe you don't care about her as much as you claim." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about David needing money. This was calculated. This was a plan. This man had targeted my mother specifically because he knew she had a son with money. And he had manipulated her, this beautiful, kind woman who had sacrificed everything for me, into being his accomplice. She was his tool, his weapon against me. Asterisk, I said no. I told them I wouldn't give them the money. I said, Mom, I love you, but I'm not giving you $150,000 so you can bankrupt yourself with a man you've known for 8 months. My mother's face fell, and then she did something I will never, ever forgive. She said, Then you're not my son anymore. Get out of my house. I stood up. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized that the woman I had sacrificed 12 years for was a stranger. She was a victim of manipulation, yes, but she had also made a choice. She had chosen money and a man over her own son, her own flesh and blood. The child she had given birth to. I said, Okay, Mom, I'm leaving. But you should know something. David Mitchell is a con man. He's done this before. There are 3 other women who have given him money and are now broke. You're just the latest victim. I walked out of that house, and I walked out of my mother's life, and I didn't look back. Asterisk, for 3 months I didn't hear from my mother. 3 months of complete and total silence. And you know what I did during those 3 months? I investigated. I hired a private investigator. I dug into David Mitchell's background like a man possessed, and everything I found made my blood boil. Everything. David had been married 4 times. 4 times. Each time, his wives had mysteriously become bankrupt within a year of marriage. One of them tried to press charges, but she couldn't prove anything. He was too smart for that. One of them actually took her own life because of the financial stress and emotional abuse. She left a note that mentioned David by name. And yet he was still free, still predatory, still hunting for his next victim, and my mother was about to become victim number 5. Asterisk. So I made a decision. I made a choice. I wasn't going to let him destroy my mother, and I wasn't going to let him destroy anyone else. This man needed to be exposed. He needed to face real consequences. He needed to be stopped. And I knew exactly how to do it. I had the evidence. I had the investigation. I had the truth. And I was going to use it to burn his entire empire to the ground. This is where my real story begins. Because what comes next is how I took down the man who destroyed my mother, how I exposed his lies, how I made him pay, and how my mother had to face the consequences of her choices. This is the story of revenge. Asterisk. I spent 6 weeks gathering everything I needed. The private investigator had given me a detailed file on David Mitchell. For ex-wives, 7 restraining orders that were later dropped. 23 complaints to the FBI that went nowhere because of lack of evidence. But I wasn't looking for legal evidence anymore. I was looking for something more powerful. I was looking for the truth that would destroy him. Asterisk. I hired a lawyer. A good one. I told him everything and he said, James, what you're describing is textbook financial fraud and emotional abuse. The problem is proving it. But he also said something that changed my strategy. He said, Your mother is still legally married to him. She can access their bank records. She's a joint account holder on everything. Asterisk. That's when the plan crystallized in my mind. I wasn't going to go after David directly. I was going to make my mother realize what she had done. I was going to make her see the truth with her own eyes. And then, when she understood, she would be the one to take him down. Asterisk. I called my mother. It was the first time we had spoken in 4 months. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Hello. Her voice was cautious, like she wasn't sure who was calling. Asterisk. I said, Hi, Mom, it's James. Asterisk. There was a long silence. Then she said, James. Oh my God, James, I've been wanting to call you for so long. I'm so sorry about everything. I've made such a terrible mistake. Asterisk, but I didn't care about her apologies. Not anymore. I said, Mom, I need you to do something for me. I need you to check your joint bank account with David, the one he uses for his business. I need you to look at the last 6 months of transactions. Asterisk, she said. James, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? Asterisk, I said. Mom, just trust me. please, do it right now while we're on the phone. Asterisk, I could hear her moving around the house. Then she said, okay, I'm logging in. I waited. I could hear the clicking of her keyboard. And then I heard her gasp. James. James, what is this? There's over $300,000 in this account. I didn't know about this. I didn't authorize any of these transfers. Asterisk, I said. Keep looking, Mom. Check the credit cards. Asterisk, she checked. And what she found made her cry out. 16 credit cards that she didn't know existed, all maxed out, over $500,000 in debt, and the transactions showed exactly what I expected. Designer clothes, luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, all paid for by David using her name, her social security number, her credit. Asterisk, my mother started to panic. She said, James, what do I do? What do I do? If this debt is in my name, then I'm responsible for it. I could be sued. I could lose everything. Asterisk, I said. Mom, you already did lose everything. You lost me for this man. Asterisk, there was silence on the other end of the phone. Then my mother said something that I will never forget. She said, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I don't deserve your forgiveness. Asterisk, I told her to go to the bank immediately. I told her to dispute every transaction. I told her to file a police report. And I told her to hire a lawyer. She asked me if I would help her. And this time, I said yes. Asterisk, the next day my mother came to my apartment. She looked like she had aged 10 years. Her eyes were red from crying, and she carried a folder full of documents from the bank. She sat down at my kitchen table and she said, James, I need you to know something. I need you to understand that I've been living in a nightmare and I didn't even know it. David told me that your grandmother's inheritance was too much money for you to handle at your age. He said you needed guidance. He said he could help you invest it properly if you would just give it to him through me. He was so convincing, James, so smooth. He made it all sound reasonable. Asterisk, I said, Mom, he's a professional con artist. This is what he does. It's asterisk, she said. I know that now. But when I was with him, when he was telling me these things, I wanted to believe him. Because I wanted to believe that someone loved me. I wanted to believe that I deserved happiness. After all those years of struggling, of being alone, I wanted to believe that I had finally found someone who would take care of me. And I was willing to sacrifice anything for that. Even you. Even my own son. Asterisk, I looked at my mother and I realized something. She was a victim, but she was also complicit. And both things could be true at the same time. Asterisk, I said, Mom, we need to focus on what we're going to do now. Asterisk, we spent the next 3 weeks building a case against David. We got access to all the financial records. We found evidence of fraud going back 12 years. We found records of his previous marriages and the money he had stolen from each wife. We found psychiatric evaluations from 2 of his ex-wives who had been institutionalized due to the psychological abuse. Asterisk. But here's the thing about David Mitchell that I learned. He was smart. He had covered his tracks extremely well. He had set up shell companies and offshore accounts. He had moved money through multiple banks. And most importantly, he had done everything in a way that made it look like my mother had authorized it. Asterisk. That's when I realized that physical evidence wasn't going to be enough. I needed David to confess. I needed him to admit what he had done. So I decided to set a trap. I called David. I told him that I had thought about what he said. I told him that I had realized I was being selfish. I told him that I wanted to give him the money. I told him that I had $150,000 and I was willing to transfer it to him immediately. If he would just meet with me in person and apologize to me for the way he had treated me. Asterisk, David said yes. He said, I knew you'd come around, kid. You're smarter than I thought. Asterisk, we arranged to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Boston on a Saturday morning. And before I went to that meeting, I did something that I'm not particularly proud of. I wore a wire. I had a recording device hidden under my shirt that would capture everything David said. Asterisk, when I got to the coffee shop, David was already there. He was sitting at a corner table with a coffee in front of him, and he looked so confident, so untouchable, so sure that he had one. Asterisk, I sat down across from him and he smiled. He said, James, good to see you, buddy. I knew your mother would convince you eventually. She's very good at convincing people to do things they don't want to do, isn't she? Asterisk, I said, yeah, she is. Asterisk, he said, so you've got the money? Asterisk, I said, I do. But before I give it to you, I need you to explain something to me. I need you to explain why you did this to my mother. Why you targeted her. Why you destroyed her life. Asterisk, David's smile faded. I said, what are you talking about, James? Asterisk, I said, I know who you are, David. I know about your ex-wives. I know about the money you stole from them. I know about the woman who killed herself because of you. Asterisk, David's face went pale. For a moment I thought he might try to run, but then he did something unexpected. He laughed. He actually laughed, and then he said, so what? So what if I've done this before? Your mother was stupid enough to fall for it. Most women are so desperate for love that they'll believe anything. And your mother, she was especially pathetic. Spending all those years alone, working herself to death, and then when I came along, she was so grateful, so easy to manipulate. Asterisk, I said, you're recording your own confession right now, David. The FBI is listening to every word you're saying. Asterisk, but that's not actually what I said. I didn't want to tip him off that I was recording. I wanted him to keep talking. I wanted him to incriminate himself completely. Asterisk, so I said, but I'm still willing to give you the money. David, I'm still willing to make this all go away if you just admit what you've done. Asterisk, David leaned back in his chair. He said, kid, you don't have the guts to do anything. Even if you did, I have lawyers that make your head spin. I have connections. I have resources. You think you're the first person to try to take me down? You think you're special? You're not. You're just another idiot who's trying to protect mommy. And it's pathetic. Asterisk, then he said something that made my blood boil. He said, your mother is probably the easiest mark I've ever had. She's so desperate to be wanted that she would give me everything. And I mean everything. You know what? Maybe I'll stick around for a few more years, drain her completely, and then move on to the next one. There are a lot of lonely, stupid women out there, James. A lot of them. Asterisk. That's when I stood up. I pulled out my phone and I showed him the recording app that was running. I said, every word you just said is recorded, David, and I'm going to make sure that every judge, every lawyer, and every law enforcement officer in this country knows exactly what you've done. Asterisk, David's face turned red with rage. He stood up and he said, you little punk, you think you're so smart? You think you're going to destroy me? I'll destroy you first. I'll take everything from you, just like I took everything from your mother. Asterisk. And then he tried to grab me. But I was ready for him. I'd already texted the police before the meeting, and they were waiting outside the coffee shop. Within seconds, officers came rushing in and tackled David to the ground. They cuffed him and read him his rights. Asterisk, as they were taking him away, David looked at me and he said, this isn't over, James. This isn't over, asterisk, but it was. It was finally over. Asterisk, the recording of David's confession was enough to build a case against him. The FBI opened an investigation. They brought in forensic accountants who traced the money he had stolen from his victims. They found millions of dollars in offshore accounts. They connected him to fraud cases spanning 3 decades. Asterisk, 6 months later, David Mitchell was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The judge said, Mr. Mitchell, you are a predatory criminal who has caused immeasurable damage to innocent women. You have shown no remorse, and you represent a clear and present danger to society. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison. Asterisk, when my mother heard the verdict, she cried. But these weren't tears of sorrow. These were tears of relief. These were tears of freedom. Asterisk, but the ending to this story isn't about David going to prison. The ending is about what happened next with my mother. Asterisk, after David was arrested, my mother filed for divorce. She also filed claims against his assets to recover some of the money he had stolen from her. The court awarded her $500,000, which was half of what he owed her. But the money wasn't what mattered to her anymore. Asterisk, what mattered was the realization that she had been a fool, that she had thrown away the most precious thing she had, which was her relationship with her own son. For a man who never cared about her at all, My mother came to my apartment one evening, about a week after David was sentenced. She brought a letter. Said she had written it 100 times and rewritten it 100 times. But she needed to read it to me in person. The letter said, "James, I am your mother. I gave birth to you. I raised you. I failed you in the most fundamental way possible. I chose a man over my own child. I chose money and the promise of love over the person who had loved me unconditionally my entire life. You sacrificed 12 years for me, and I repaid you with betrayal and abandonment. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I see what I've done. I see it clearly now, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand how I became such a person. How I could look at my own son, the person who loved me more than anything in this world, and throw him away. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry. And then she stopped reading. She put the letter down and she looked at me. She said, I know that sorry doesn't fix anything. I know that an apology doesn't undo the hurt. But if you can find it in your heart to let me back into your life, I promise you that I will spend every single day for the rest of my life making it up to you. I looked at my mother. This woman who had sacrificed everything for me when I was a child. This woman who had worked herself to death to keep us alive. This woman who had also betrayed me in the deepest way possible. And I realized something very important. Revenge, true revenge, isn't about destroying the other person. It's about making them see what they've done. It's about forcing them to confront the consequences of their actions. It's about deciding whether forgiveness is possible after that confrontation. I said to my mother, I forgive you, Mom. But forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. Forgiveness means that I'm willing to try again, that I'm willing to see if we can rebuild what we lost, but it's going to take time. And I need you to understand that things will never be the way they were before. We can't go back to that. We can only move forward. My mother nodded. She said, I understand, and that's all I'm asking for, the chance to move forward. We didn't hug. We didn't have some magical moment of reconciliation. But we did sit down together and we talked. We talked about everything that had happened. We talked about why she had made the choices she made. We talked about why I had been willing to go to such lengths to expose David, and slowly. Over the course of months, we rebuilt our relationship. It's different now. It's not perfect. There are still moments where I feel the sting of what she did. There are still moments where she feels the guilt of her actions, but there's also love, and there's understanding, and there's the knowledge that we both survived something terrible, and we came out the other side. My mother never asked me for money again. She got a job working at a community center helping at-risk youth. She found meaning in helping other people. And I think in some way it was her way of trying to make amends, not just to me, but to the world, for the choices she had made. As for David Mitchell, he's still in federal prison. He's never admitted that what he did was wrong. He's never shown remorse. In his mind, he's the victim. He's the person who was wronged. And I think that's the saddest part of this whole story. The fact that even after everything, even after being exposed and convicted and sent to prison, he still can't see the damage he's caused. But that's not my problem anymore. That's his problem. My problem was always about my mother. My problem was about saving her from herself. And in the end, I did. Not by giving her money, not by protecting her from David, but by forcing her to see the truth about what was happening to her. By forcing her to make a choice, and by giving her the chance to make amends. This is the story of revenge. But it's not the kind of revenge where everyone loses. It's the kind of revenge where the person who wronged you realizes what they've done, and you get the chance to rebuild. It's the kind of revenge where justice is served, but forgiveness is also possible. And sometimes that's the best kind of ending there is.